Hey, welcome back to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. I'm your host, Coach Zach. I'm here with Coach Zach and CJ Hunt, aka Silly C.
Yo, yo.
Yo, yo.
Yo, yo.
Hey. Guys, exciting things happening at the gym. A little remodel going on. We got lots of construction happening. They're in the other room across the hall demoing stuff. So if you hear drilling going on in the background, you'll know why. Hopefully nobody's screaming in the background because they, smashed their thumb with a hammer or anything like that.
We can edit it.
Yeah, we'll edit it. We'll cut it out. You won't know the difference. But yeah, some exciting things. So, we'll talk about that more and more in the future as we kind of get along. But lots of good stuff coming to the future of Pulse Fitness. So, all right, diving into our topic for the day. So we're talking about functional training, and I said, maybe we should do a podcast on functional training. And Zach goes, what does that mean? And functional training is kind of like a buzzword. Everybody says, not everybody, but lots of gyms or training models say that they do functional training. And you're like, when people hear the term functional training, they think of like doing box jumps, which I'd probably say is like not functional at all. Or, we'll get into it. But there's this, attitude in the industry of like functional training is not using machines. And you're like, well, is that functional or is that not functional? So we're going to dive into that topic a little bit more today. So I guess we'll do a little round robin here. I want to get your guys' initial thoughts. And then we can kind of lay some stuff out for our listeners. So Zach, what is functional training?
I don't really like the term. I don't like, because kind of what you laid out already. I think everybody claims whatever is functional training or what. I don't like that. I don't know how you would differentiate it. So normally when I hear like functional training, it's like you're doing exercises in the gym that are mimic or are the exact same as what you would do throughout your regular life. And like, to me, functional training doesn't have to be something you do every day. Like there's tons of things that we do in the gym that you will never, ever casually go through that movement pattern in your regular life. It doesn't mean it's not functional, because it can still function towards helping you progress and reach the desired adaptation and achieve whatever your goal may be, like why you're training. So to me, like functional training would just be anything that like functions towards your goal to help you like progress and achieve whatever outcomes that you're looking for. It doesn't have to be something that you just like a squat is a functional movement versus like some core exercise that might be great at like challenging your core because you need that necessary adaptation or ability in order to achieve whatever your goal may be, even if you don't naturally do it without realizing it, like throughout your day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, you remember when you're in elementary school and, you have like your function table and it's like the input output. You remember these? This is like a little 2 columns, input, output. CJ knows what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, flashcards.
Yeah, flashcards. But it's kind of dumbing it down. That's kind of the same approach. Is like the exercise that we put in, like what's the output, and does that match with what it is that we're trying to accomplish? And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, which is functional training is like, well, what function are we trying to achieve? We always talk about like why on this podcast, like what is the goal, and does the training that I'm doing match and or support me accomplishing that goal? So functional training is I guess in the fitness industry, it's sold as being like movement versus muscles. Like I'm training like the way somebody moves versus focusing on muscle groups specifically. And, oh, by the way, when you're working and moving, your muscles are working, but it's not like, I'm not just trying to get like big biceps, it's not bodybuilding. However, if my goal was to get big biceps, that's the function. Like doing the curls is the functional training method for getting bigger biceps. That's your argument.
Yeah. And like, it just, even outside of like the bodybuilding aspect, like if your goal is whatever, you're an athlete and you're whatever your sport may be, like say you're a lineman in football, you need to be a strong, like horizontal pushing power. So like to me, if you're in a seated chest press machine, like you won't be seated while you're pushing your defensive lineman, whoever it may be, but it's creating strength and whatever you need to be able to do that effectively when you're on the field. So like to me, that's functional, even though most people, that's like the number one thing I always hear about, like, oh, what's not functional? Because that's why I asked in our meeting, I was like, okay, well, what's not functional? And then I hear stuff like that, like a seated machine, whatever, which makes sense in a way because you're in a fixed plane, nothing else is moving, everything is controlled for you. When in real life, nothing is controlled. You have to be able to move your body through space. But if you're that offensive lineman or whatever your position may be, and you need to be very, very strong at horizontal pushing power, if you're in an isolated fixed plane machine, that's going to get you very, very strong because it's eliminating all of those other stressors that would limit your pushing power. So to me, like that would be functional because it functions you, or it's functional as far as it progresses you towards being better at whatever your desired outcome is.
It's not the specific movement. We're eliminating specificity, but at the same time, like it supports that movement. If we were trying to mimic it and be specific, it would be from a standing position.
Yeah, so it's specific in the muscle that it's targeting, but it's not specific in the movement.
Yes. And I'll say like one of the things that I appreciate about you, Zach, is you challenge the status quo or like these ideas or conceptions that exist. And when I said, hey, maybe we should do a podcast about functional training, what functional training is, and you said, what's not functional, it like stumped me. Like I froze for a second and I blanked. I was like, what isn't functional training, you know? And that was a, I don't know, interesting just moment we had in the conversation while we were brainstorming episodes. So, CJ, let me tie you in here, bud. So, when I look at like your workouts, the way you train yourself, right? It seems to me like everything that you try to do for the most part has some additional complexities to it, right? And looking at that as a outsider, you might say like, oh, well, that's like functional training at its finest, you know, type of deal. You're bringing in a balance component, or you're I don't know, I don't even know how to explain it, but there's always added elements to it, which some would argue is good, some would argue is bad, or you know, depends on the function so that you're trying to accomplish, right? So like, what is your thought process on this?
Well, like when it comes to functional training, I just kind of piggyback kind of off of that. It's stuff that you need to do to be functional in life. It's just everyday kind of movements. Doesn't mean that you have to do the exact movement that you're going to do in life. Just like Zach was saying, you know, I think of kind of four main things: in a squat position, which is going to be using more of your legs, you know, your quads, a deadlift, and then like a rotational and core strength. I'm really big on that. And that's where a lot of the balance component comes into it. When you add just that little bit, it not only brings focus into it, but it really helps you to get just a little bit extra. And if that's what you need to work on, that's something that can help. That helps you get to your function.
So you're kind of saying like you need these big prime movers, like to focus on your big prime movers, right? Or larger muscle group movements. Mm-hmm. So squat, deadlift, core rotation, like those are all things that you're doing day to day. So that's like more of a traditional thought process, I guess, around like what functional training has been coined as.
Makes it easier to do the things that you need to do. And I think that's more for, I don't know if I'd say basic, but more normal people. Seems like Zach is coming more from like an elite athlete perspective, but I mean, everybody needs it too. You know, it's not going to be just as, it's the same idea, just in a, I don't know, an easier way to kind of think about it in the movement patterns. If you need to move a little bit quicker, you do a few more movements with it. If you don't need to, and you're doing it more for just the ability to live and make stuff easier, you can kind of stick to those main four because you can get better at those. And that's going to help you in stuff that you actually need to do. You know, picking up groceries, carrying them upstairs, anything like that, being able to turn and pick things up. That's really kind of the idea.
I think my take on it is probably maybe like a little hybrid between both of you guys, because to me, like, is running functional? Like, it's a human movement, right? But if I never run ever, and I'm never going to run, should I like train to run? And people always like, if I'm going to run a marathon, functional training for me would incorporate lots of running, because the movements that we do create adaptations within our body. It's microevolution, right? We're creating adaptation to get more efficient at what it is that we're trying to accomplish. The human body is lazy. It doesn't want to work hard. And so anything that we do that's difficult for the body, it will find an efficient way to accomplish that. So if I'm going to run a really long distance, right? It's like my body's going to go, listen, like, we want to make this running thing efficient. So we're going to get skinny. We're going to, have slow twitch. We're going to focus on our slow twitch muscle fibers if I'm running longer distances, right? We talked about energy systems on a former episode. It's like, I'm going to develop the energy systems used in that activity that I'm doing. My body is going to go through this microevolution to make whatever it is that I'm trying to force upon it more efficient and easier for me to perform. And to me, that's kind of functional training, is like, what is the thing that I'm training my body to do? If I don't have anything that's specific that I'm trying to accomplish, then it's like, I just need a well-rounded program that's going to allow me to pretty much go and do whatever it is that I want to do without it being difficult for me. So, and that's kind of, I think, the way we design our programming, is like, we want our clients to be capable of just going out and doing whatever it is that they want to do and not thinking, this is difficult for me. And so if there were such a thing as functional training, I would say that's as close as you're possibly going to get universally as a concept, not like on an individual level, which is, I just want to be able to go do whatever and not think about it and not be like, oh, this is tough. I can't play basketball with my kids because I'm winded. It's like, no, I'm not winded. No, I am able to cut and twist quickly because my training program is well-rounded and incorporates all of those things.
Stuff you're not even thinking about doing.
Yeah. And it's equally as effective for me to go and like help my buddy move furniture.
Yep.
You know, I've got the strength component. I've got the quickness and the agility. It's kind of a all-encompassing approach. I don't know. Zach, what's your take on that?
I mean, I agree with you. I would just say specificity for the general population tends to be overrated or unnecessary in like certain components, of course. So like if somebody, my background is in strength conditioning. So like my example would be for an athlete, but like it works for anybody. It's like if you're somebody, let's say it's not even an athlete, but you're just somebody who regularly works out. Most people tend to work out in the sagittal plane, which is just forward and back. Like if you were working out in a skinny hallway, like shoulder width, and only exercise you could do, that would be the sagittal plane, right? So forward and back. But if you love squatting, you squat a ton of weight, whatever, even if you're just a recreational lifter, if you know what you're doing, you know, like your adductors are incredibly important to keeping your legs abducted in the bottom of a squat. So logically, you would be like, okay, if I want to get better at squatting, due to the rule of specificity, I need to squat 100 times over, 1,000,000 times over. But if you moved into the coronal plane where you're moving side to side to strengthen your adductors, that might not be specific in movement pattern, but it will still function towards your goal, right? So it's still going to, if you do like a lateral squat, you're strengthening your muscles' ability to move in the coronal plane, and it's improving the muscles you need in a squat, even though like based on the rule of specificity, like that's not specific. So like it's specific to your goal in the end range, but I feel like most general population people, like I don't know how important specificity is, other than the fact that like you should be able to squat because you have to do it 100 times a day. You should be able to lunge. You should be able to hinge, things like that. I think functionality like kind of gets like, I think it becomes too narrow for most people, where like I would argue pretty much everything could be functional depending on what your goal is. If you're just like an 80-year-old person who wants to be able to get up often, like up and off the couch, like you could do like, if somebody's like advanced enough, like something that's like a single leg squat to a bench with support, even if they're like holding onto a dowel for support, they're never going to have to do a single leg off of a squat or off of the couch or whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean it's not functional for them, even though they won't do it, because it's going to strengthen their ability to do that. It also is going to strengthen multiple different layers, right? Like as you get older, you need to be able better stability, which would be unilateral movements and things like that. So I would just say it depends on what your function is. Like if you dig deep enough, I feel like everything could be deemed functional based on whatever it is you choose to do, because the odds are if you go through the motion in the gym, you most likely it's going to translate somehow to what you do throughout your daily life, even if it's not an exercise, like a movement pattern that you would haphazardly like come across throughout your normal day. So I just think people tend to get like locked into like a narrow focus and like thinking of like, oh, this isn't functional because this isn't something that I just accidentally do throughout my day. And I feel like it hinders people's gym approach.
Yeah. So in other words, what you're saying is move in all planes of direction, and
yeah, we don't
train and move in all planes of direction.
Right. Like we don't live in one plane. Yeah. Everything you do is through multiple planes, even if it's just like you have to turn to reach for something like off the shelf or whatever, like that doesn't exist in one plane. Most things occur in all three planes, at least two of them for the most part. So like if we only like, are we so caught up in specificity because we want to create certain adaptations that we're like, oh, we only have to do this because this is exactly how I move. Like there's not a lot of movements in the gym that can like mimic I'm turning and rotating, coming up onto my toe to reach for something off like the top shelf. Right. So like you need to do a ton of different things that would all together like combine into something that will help you be able to move freely and like correctly throughout your daily life without having to be so locked into like what is functional, what's not.
Yeah. So, and that's what you're doing is you're selling the knowledge that we have basically to put together a well-rounded program. And this is one of the reasons why people will struggle or have overuse injuries or breakdown and things when they're just going into the gym and just working in that one like forward backwards plane, and they're not training in multiple planes and having a well-rounded approach. It's like, yeah, you're neglecting certain muscle groups, you're focusing on others, and you're doing that repetitively over and over and over again. It's going to create compensation. Again, back to adaptation, like that's the thing that you're telling your body to do. So it's going to figure out how to grow and restructure itself to be efficient at at those movements. And then that's going to create imbalances that are going to lead to breakdown. Right?
Yeah, your body, like adaptation is nothing other than like how your body responds to a certain stimulus. So like your job should be, if you're like just concerned about like daily moving and quality of life and like being functional throughout your daily life, would be to introduce your body to as much wide range of different stimulus as you can and as regularly as you can. Because a lot of people fall in love with the same type of exercise in the gym and they just want to do that all the time, which there are certain exercises like the main movement patterns that you do need to do every single day. But like there are millions. If you look hard enough and like care enough to learn, like there's enormous amounts of like variations that you can do to that same movement to where you can add all your benefits without having to be locked into something that eventually ends up being like an asymmetry, which produces more injuries than necessary.
I think that's one of the reasons why like we do the MET too, like because it gets you moving in different ways and different positions that you're not always going to do in your weightlifting. So it's good to kind of mix that in.
And training a different energy system, right? And so that would be the non like structural, I guess it's still to a degree, like it still has to do with your structure of your lungs and respiratory system, but let's not get into that. But like your energy system development, like you want to train in higher heart rate zones where the oxygen demand is higher. You want to strength train and where you have a different demand, like energy system that you're focusing on. And that's another important aspect of functional training where it's like, hey, this is a well-rounded approach. I'm capable of going and doing whatever it is that I need to do. And it's like a, old school power lifter that only does like squats and deadlifts and bench press. Like they're not going to be able to go out and run at all, right?
Yeah. If you've ever been to a powerlifting meet or bodybuilding, or you just seen them, those are like the least functional people you'll ever see.
Yes.
Because they've gotten very, very good at creating muscular adaptations for what they need, but zero like functionality. And then, like if you needed them to go play a sport, like they could even if they were at one time, they lost all of that.
Yeah.
They don't, that doesn't exist.
When I first started working here, we did a flag football game, like a member flag football game. And I remember it was super fun. Everybody's out there. We're playing flag football. And it was on a Sunday. And then the next day on Monday, every single person came in here and our hip flexors were so sore. I'm included in that. I was like, whoa. And everybody felt exactly the same, the coaches, the clients. And we're like, what are we not doing in our training program that we need to be doing that's going to allow us to go out and like, it was a good learning experience for us. And it was like, oh, hey, yeah, we probably need to incorporate some more like agility stuff into our programming so that we're capable of doing this and not being miserable the next day.
Yeah. And that example shows like there was clearly a blatant hole in that program.
Yeah.
And like, that's a perfect example of like how we're talking about, like you need, like CJ, like you need to move. Like if you watch like children like up to like the age of 6 are like the perfect example of like how to move. Like all they do is they find by experiment, right? Like they don't have to be taught how to squat, how to lunge, how to like, they do all those things perfectly. We like unlearn that as we get older. And like, then like, that's a perfect example because people in the gym, like they don't train their hip flexors, at least not in an isolated sense, right? So like that's a perfect example. They weren't used to like running in that high like volume of hip flexion. So that doesn't mean we need to train hip flexion every single day, but like it shows that there was clearly something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And that they were not functional to the full capacity for sure.
Yeah, right. And I mean the other I guess opposite end of the spectrum from like the power lifter would be the runner, right? Like your runner, like that person's not going to be able to lift something heavy over their head.
Yeah, no, if they were in a fire or something and there was a board that fell on top of them, like they're screwed. Like there's no way.
They can't run away. They're being held down.
Press it off of them.
Yeah. And so that's, I guess this episode, we don't script these things, right? We just kind of come up with an idea of our main topic and then we research it. And then it's like, let's talk about it. This one has definitely gone a different direction than what I was expecting. And I think that if anything, as we have talked through this, it's just solidified that our approach to training is the right approach because it's well-rounded. We're training in all the different planes of motion. We take our members through different phases of training where, the goal, the function that we're trying to accomplish is different. And the idea or hope would be that by having a well-rounded program, our clients can go out and live their life and do whatever it is that they want to do at any given moment and be capable of doing that. And I think, if you had your legs cut off and you were in a wheelchair, like the thing that you're going to want to do most is like get up and walk or run. Right. And a lot of people create that themselves in a poor training program or by not training at all. And so think about how fortunate you are to have your legs, but like empower yourself to train appropriately so that you are free and you can go do whatever it is you want to do and never worry that you're not going to be capable of it. Right?
Agreed.
All right, guys, that's all we got for you. We'll be back next week with more great stuff.
Don't go chasing waterfalls. Stick to the rivers and streams you used to.
Thank you so much for listening to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. Do you have a question that you'd like for us to answer live on the podcast? If so, all you need to do is head over to the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone and do 3 simple things. First, leave us a rating and review telling me what you think of the podcast. In that review, ask anything you want related to health, fitness, or nutrition. And if you want a shout out, leave us your Instagram handle or name. That's all you have to do. Then listen to hear your questions answered live on the next Q&A episode.